Recently, I participated in Untitled Game Jam number 90, and throughout the week-long development of my game Mildly Overengineered Maze, I realized that I still had a lot to learn in my ongoing battle with procrastination. In this video, I'll document how procrastination almost crippled my game's development and how I was able to overcome it to finish my game and submit it before the deadline. I will also discuss what I learned from this experience and give my advice for any game devs out there who are struggling with the same issues. Last time, when I participated in Untitled Game Jam number 89, I joined the game jam after it started and thus had no preparation time. This time, I was going to be prepared. The moment the jam started, the theme was announced and I hopped on call with one of my friends to discuss possible game ideas using the theme of layers. I was going to be making the game by myself, but I thought having an extra voice in the idea process would help. We started with the idea of a maze with many layers. We discussed a lot of ways that the theme of layers could be interpreted, but we ended up settling with my original idea, and expanding on it until we had the final game idea. The game I made for the previous Untitled Game Jam was a puzzle game, but I wanted to switch it up a bit by making a more atmospheric and/or horror game. The final idea I had for the game was this. The player is in a maze with some basic controls and they must climb ladders to traverse the layers and navigate the maze until they either find the exit or give up trying. Once I had my idea, I went to sleep, ready to start development tomorrow. It was now day 2, and with my idea in place, I opened up GameMaker and made a new project. I started by figuring out how I was going to design the maze. I knew it was going to be big, so I wanted something that was easy to edit and light on the computer's memory. I also wanted the game to have a unique look to it, so I had an idea. The maze would be stored as a two-dimensional array, basically a grid of numbers. For now, the only numbers we need are 0, an empty space, and 1, a wall. Using the player's X, Y, and angle variables, raycasts would be drawn from the player's position to determine where the walls are, and draw points where the line intersected with a wall. Coding this in GameMaker was painful. Once I figured it out, it felt like I could do anything. That feeling you get when your code finally works, especially when it's purely visual code like this, and you can just sit back and see and feel and experience your creation. That is why I love game development. Anyway, once I was sure the code was working, I could store a layer of the maze in a string of numbers. Of course, the length of this string will be the length of the maze multiplied by the width of the maze, or just the length or height squared since they were both the same number anyway. The final maze would end up being 51 by 51, which means the length is... oh, that's a big number. Yeah, remember what I said about the maze needing to be easy to edit? Well, I wasn't going to scroll through over 2,000 characters just to see where I forgot to put a 1 or a 0, so I made a level editor. Unlike my last game GrabStack, this level editor was never going to be used by players, so I could design it for me and for me alone. If you're curious, this is what the level editor I designed looks like. The arrow keys move the pointer, the number keys change the number, C to copy, V to paste, pretty simple. For more information on how I tackle the challenge of making level editors for my games, check out my last devlog where I made GrabStack for Untitled Game Jam number 89. In that video, I go into more detail about how the level and level editor handle level data, and how the level editor interacts with level data. Going back to the maze itself, I then designed the first layer of the maze, which I won't show in the editor because I don't want to spoil the layout of the maze. I also let my friend playtest it, and I took their feedback into account. I later implemented ladders that allow the player to go between the different layers of the maze. The layers themselves are stored like this, and when the player interacts with a ladder, the game swaps out one layer for another. There were a few things I ended up not implementing for one reason or another. I originally intended for there to be a monster sneaking around the maze along with the player, with a complex AI that would occasionally sneak up from behind or try to ambush the player. That was far outside the scope of the game, so I scrapped it. There are also some things that I regret not adding, and by that, I mean I just regret not putting more effort into the audio. The background music is literally just radio static I downloaded, which is a massive step back from the 7-track OST I made for my last game, GrabStack. Also, every action has a sound effect tied to it. There's a sound effect for turning, stepping forward, and trying to step forward but hitting a wall. Unfortunately, I neglected to add sound effect for climbing up and down ladders, the only action that would benefit from having a sound effect. Using ladders is the only action in the game that isn't intuitive to new players, so having some audible indication that you're performing an action would help players understand what they're doing. Overall, not putting more effort into the audio is my biggest regret of the game jam. Other than the few features I ended up not implementing, the game was turning out better than I imagined. It was now a couple of days into the game jam, and the checklist for things to do was rapidly shrinking. I still had about half of the jam left to finish my game that in most aspects was already finished, so what could go wrong? So, let's look at what I've done up to this point and review the list of things I have to do in the final days of the jam. I've implemented the visuals and the gameplay and the first layer of the maze, but I still need to design the rest of the layers, however many I end up adding. Also, I previously added this letter that pops up at the start of the game, but at this point in development, I hadn't decided on what the contents of the letter would be, so the next steps were obvious. Write the letter in a text editor, transfer the contents of the letter into the pixel art font I created, design the maze, and finally add the end screen for when you find the exit. Once the game was finished, I could make the game page and submit it, possibly days before the submission deadline if I did everything efficiently. It sounded so easy in theory, but when it came to actually doing something, I was faced with my worst nightmare: procrastination. You see, procrastination is the silent killer of productivity, and as someone who values productivity a lot, procrastination pains me. The inability to be productive for the last few days of the game jam almost ruined me, and while I ended up finishing the game and submitting it, it was only possible because I pulled an all-nighter last minute, fueled solely by an unwillingness to give up. I submitted my game Mildly Overengineered Maze early in the morning, and settled down for some much needed sleep as the sun started to rise. I admit, it's far from the healthiest way to make a game, but after enough time had passed, it became my only option, and in the end, I'm glad I took it. A lot of the game ended up rushed because of my inability to motivate myself until the last minute, but it's important to understand that I do not consider the game's development to be a failure. I submitted my game before the deadline and I was still pretty happy with it despite its shortcomings. I would later go back and play other people's submissions and rate them and give feedback, excitedly reading the feedback I got on my own game. In the end, Mildly Overengineered Maze scored 9th place overall, with its highest rank being visuals at number 5. The game I made for the previous Untitled Game Jam, GrabStack, scored number 10 overall, so I'd say it's an improvement. If I learned a lesson from this experience, it would be to keep in mind that even if things don't go perfectly according to plan, finishing and submitting your work is still a significant accomplishment and always better than giving up and getting nothing done. So, that was my Untitled Game Jam number 90 journey, and the week-long development of my latest game, Mildly Overengineered Maze. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. I love participating in game jams as they're a way to motivate yourself to do something small while still feeling like you're doing something important. I've also really enjoyed the community aspect of it, and I've recently been more active in the Untitled Game Jam Discord server. I even had a discussion after the jam ended with someone who was introduced to Untitled Game Jam through my last video. So, hi. If you're watching this, glad I could get you on board. As for what I'll do next, I participated in Untitled Game Jam number 89 and number 90, so will I join Untitled Game Jam number 91, or will I find a new game jam to participate in? The answer is both. I'm dedicated to submitting a game to every Untitled Game Jam, at least up until the big 100, and a YouTuber I follow has recently announced his own game jam, In Search of Unique, which I will be participating in. Unfortunately, In Search of Unique overlaps completely with the next Untitled Game Jam, so if I commit to both of them, I'll effectively be making one game with my left hand and another with my right. Is that even possible? I guess you'll just have to wait the 2 weeks it'll take for me to participate in the jams and make a video on them. Until then, keep an eye on my channel for updates on my game development journey and join me as I tackle new challenges and push myself to improve as a game developer. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.